Hey, Scott from MyGrowthRings.com. Here once again is in the home of my future shop. Now, back in the mid 1950s, around the same time that Shopsmith was introducing the Mark V, a gentleman with the last name Wagner came up with an idea that he patented, and it was really not a brand new idea per se. The idea was to make what was then known generically as a rotary planer, but to make it more better, and most of all, to make it safe. A rotary planer is a device that can mount in any drill press, and in some cases, even in a radial arm saw, to allow it to do some degree of planing. And in fact, some of the features of Mr. Wagner's rotary planer made it so safe, he eventually trademarked the name Safe-T-Planer, Safe-T-Planer. Now, this product was sold well into the 1980s, and gosh, I want to say even into the 90s. And Shopsmith sold quite a number of these over the years. And at some point, and I won't go into all the lore because unfortunately, a lot of it is lore. Eventually, Shopsmith switched suppliers and started selling this product, the Medallion Planer. And it is almost a straight up knockoff of the Wagner Safe-T-Planer. Now, by this time, the patents had expired, and maybe Mr. Wagner was getting out of business. I do know there came a time where he was completely out. But there are some interesting things about this product, some improvements that were driven in part by recommendations from Shopsmith. I'll also point this out to you. We're going to open this package, but this is an unopened old stock. Anytime you see a Shopsmith part number in a catalog or on a product that isn't just a number but begins with a letter, it means it's an allied product. It's a product that was made for Shopsmith, not manufactured by Shopsmith. Okay, both of these companies are now gone, but this product is not completely unavailable. Of course, they're available through eBay, which is where I picked this one up, but it's been picked up and dropped by several people, including Woodworker Supply. They had their own brand, the Like Tongue Wood Shop years ago, Tool Shop, if you remember those guys up in Cleveland, I think. I think it was sold by the Woodworkers Warehouse. And today you can buy a rotary planer that's a pretty faithful, actually, it's almost a faithful knockoff of the Medallion Planer from a company called StewMac. I have a StewMac rotary planer. I can't find that darn thing since we moved, and hopefully by our follow-up video, I'll have that one in hand and show you how it's different than even these two. But let's take a look at this and what makes this special. So what did Mr. Wagner do? Well, first off, he made this to fit into a half-inch drill chuck, which most drill presses in its day used a half-inch drill chuck. You'll see that there are three countersunk flathead machine screws screwed from the top through three cutters in the bottom. Now, these are high-speed steel, and in the case of the Wagner Safe-T-Planer, each one of those high-speed steel cutters has a single cutting edge. And they appear to be set into a recess as if you were to have drilled this with maybe a Forstner bit with a flat end on it. But they're drilled actually at a slight angle. That hole is drilled. I'm going to have trouble showing this on camera, but what this does is it allows it to be ever so slightly dished out from the tip of the cutter inward. And so when you're cutting something, it cuts and then it moves into a cavity below. So your stock is not making contact with anything after the cutting edge removed stock. Additionally, because it's got this broad rim right here, it is preventing you from feeding more stock into the cutter than the cutter can safely remove. And it has a shoulder that prevents you from taking too big of a bite. Now, when we put this on our drill press, one of the things that we learned at Shopsmith is you can damage your drill chuck with this. A couple things can happen. The first thing that can happen is if your drill chuck isn't tight enough and this spins, you can score this and that can damage the jaws on your chuck. Additionally, and I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure if when the chucks are fully retracted, if they're making as much contact with the internal meat of the chuck or not. But we've seen them where they got twisted in the body of the chuck. The three jaws did. So, if I were to open this chuck all the way up in order to accept the safety planer, I've opened that about as far as it can possibly go. So the rule of thumb at Shopsmith was, don't use your drill chuck. I mean, you can use it and we'd be happy to sell you a new one, but a better thing to use is something called the 1/2-inch chuck arbor. On one end, it's designed to fit onto your quill spindle, it's 5/8 inch shaft. And the other end, it has a 1/2-inch gazinta, and we can fit these parts together and lock them in place with these two lower set screws. Now, when you use this, those set screws will begin to dig into the shank of the rotary planer or the shank of your router bits if you're using it for routing. And so my advice to you is the first time you use this, figure out where those set screws are going to hit it and file a flat right there. And do your best to always engage that in that spot. Better yet, you can dedicate a router chuck to your rotary planer. And in that way, you always know where it is when you need it. And if it does spin or have any burrs or anything, it doesn't matter because you're going to take it off the chuck anyway. So to use this, I'm going to put the chuck seated all the way up on the end of the quill. We're going to tighten that set screw nice and tight. We could even use the other end of our toolbox if we like. And again, I'm going to align the slight burrs that are there with the set screws. I'm going to seat that all the way up. And then we're going to tighten these set screws. Again, we're going to do that firmly because we don't need that to rotate. And that's it. That is now installed. Now, an example of when this planer would come in handy is, let's imagine I have this stock and I want to create a nice flat surface, and maybe I need to remove a bit more wood here than would be practical with a sander. I could reach for the safety planer and I can plane some of the surface off and get that down to the proper thickness, make it nice and smooth. Now to do this, I need to use a fence, or as you can see here, I can even use a hand screw clamp as a bit of a fixture to hold this wood in place. So just bring my jaws in together. This also comes in quite handy if you're surfacing maybe some turning stock, like a bowl blank that has a rough surface on top. You can grip it here with the hand screw clamps. I can hold on with the handles, I can hold on with the body, I can guide it through any which way that I like. Now let's talk about how this thing is going to cut. It is rotating, looking from above, clockwise. So as I enter this, if I come in from the front, it's going to want to push the stock this way. And in fact, I would be cutting across the grain if I go into the stock this way. So I may want to lead in this direction. Now I've got my handle of my hand screw clamp between those, so I'm going to need to be careful as I do this. I'm going to go ahead and extend the quill. We'll bring this out and just, for now, we'll touch it to see if we have any surprises. Nope. And we'll come down a little bit further and we'll take just a little cut. Now, the maximum RPM on these differ from one manufacturer to the next. I've seen them say as high as 6,000 RPM. We can go lower if we like and just play around with whatever feels comfortable to you. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this fella up to, I don't know. We're just going to play with it. We're going to find out. We're going to make sure that our quill lock is locked in place, and let's give this a try. So you can see we were just skimming across a portion of this and across the knot. The bandsaw cut a little bit deeper there, so we'd have to go a little deeper. So we'll extend the quill. Now with the Shopsmith drill press, I can set my depth over here, and I set it for how much more stock do I want to remove. And then I can extend the quill. And we're going to take off about 1/32 of an inch. And there we go, smooth enough to go ahead and hit the belt sander. See that again, right now the quill is extended, it's locked in place. I can loosen my quill lock and then adjust that for how much more I want to extend the quill. Now, if I loosen the quill lock, I just plunge to that depth stop and lock everything in place. Let's take a little more off. And you can see if we try to take too deep of a cut, that shoulder is going to keep us from even entering the cutting area. Let's raise this up a bit. And that, though it's an aggressive cut, is something we could make safely. Isn't that interesting? So we could use this to produce rabbets and lap joints, as well as producing flat surfaces. Now let's take a look at how the Medallion Planer is different from the Wagner Safe-T-Planer. Anodized aluminum body, which I always thought looked really cool. A nice label set onto the top. Very similar design, but check this out. Each of the cutters actually have two sharpened cutting edges. And because of the way this cutter is set at a slight angle, it's only ever cutting with this outside edge. It's got a second sharp edge so that when you start to get a sense that maybe it's getting dull, you can loosen them, rotate them, lining them up with a little notch right there on the edge of the body, and then away you go. Eventually you have to sharpen these, and so there was a sharpening stone available for the Wagner Rotary Planer that doesn't seem to be quite so readily available today. And I noticed that StewMac is not promoting a sharpening stone. Instead, they're going to sell you another set of cutters. For fun, let's go ahead and mount the Medallion Planer, and we'll see how it compares. Now, this is an unfair comparison, I'll just tell you up front, because my Wagner Planer was used, and this one's brand spanking new. But not everything has to be fair. We'll go ahead and set that for that same depth. And we'll see how this behaves. Wow. So that was quite a bit more aggressive, and I'm getting a much rougher surface. Would you look at that? Even though the Wagner was used and this one was brand new. It may very well be that it needed to be sharpened. Yes, not all brand new tools are sharp. Let's take a lighter cut. Yeah, definitely a rougher ride on this one as compared to the Wagner. So there's a lot more to rotary planers than what we've just covered. In our midweek follow-up, we'll get into a bit more detail. I'll show you a very simple fixture you can build that'll make this sing and do a number of things that we didn't even cover here today. Hopefully by then I'll find the StewMac version, which is currently available. As always, I will link to it in the shop notes below. Again, I look forward to your questions, comments, and cheap shots, and make it a great day.